Hero mom rescues her kidnapped son by wearing a genius disguise. But before we start, please make sure to subscribe to m&rtv and hit the bell so you never miss any upload from us. Also, leave a like right now. Whether you're overprotective or laid back, every mom has one thing in common: strength. You need it if you want to become a mom because having a child comes with too many fears to count. There's the fear that your kid will be bullied, fear that your kid will get sick. The terrible list goes on. Of course, then there's the fear, the one some moms can barely think about at all. Kidnapping is truly every parent's nightmare. This was mom Kalli Atteya's biggest worry as well, one she saw come true before her very eyes. But instead of giving up, Kalli did what most moms would do. She hopped on a plane and donned a clever disguise, determined to see her son again. Of all places Kalli Atteya thought she'd end up, the side of the road in the middle of Egypt wasn't on her list. Of course, meeting a man like Mohammed Atteya wasn't in the plan either. The day they first met, everything changed. In 1999, Kalli was on track to get her master's degree in education when she met Atteya, who was working in a restaurant in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. They got married a year later, but according to Kalli, that's when their love story took a turn. 3 months after our boy was born, he left, Kalli said of Atteya. Kalli found herself suddenly alone with her newborn son, Nico. She was thrust into the role of a single mom, no matter how hard Kalli fought for her marriage to survive. Then the truth came out. Basically, he married me for a visa, Kalli revealed. When their divorce was finally granted in 2005, Atteya moved to Egypt, though Kalli tried to keep him in Nico's life. This ended up being a fateful mistake. You see, in July of 2011, Atteya told Kalli that his mother was dying and that her final wish was for Nico to see her. The problem? Atteya's mother lived all the way in Egypt. Still, Kalli knew what she had to do. Kalli and Nico flew all the way to Egypt with Kalli's sister Maria in tow. When Atteya picked them up in a taxi, all three climbed in. But minutes later, as the family was traveling down a lonely dirt road, the car suddenly started to sputter. Atteya complained of car trouble and pulled over. According to Kalli, that's when everything changed. Atteya forced Kalli and Maria out of the car, slammed the door, and immediately disappeared down the road, taking Nico with him. Kalli described the moment in terrifying detail. Nico was pounding on the back window, screaming for me and his aunt, Kalli said, but all the two women could do was chase the taxi until it was gone, leaving only tire tracks in its wake. Abandoned in an unfamiliar country, Kalli and Maria tried not to panic. Kalli knew this wasn't a mistake. As much as she had once loved Mohammed as her husband, there was no denying that he played a much different role now, Nico's kidnapper. Kalli immediately contacted the local authorities, but it wasn't long before they realized the police were no help. See, there was another element to Nico's kidnapping that was greatly complicating things. In 2011, Egypt was in the midst of a revolution. Kalli had no doubt that this revolution would inhibit the police's search and that it probably had something to do with why Atteya kidnapped Nico in the first place. Still, this information didn't get Kalli any closer to locating her son, so she made some calls. When the local police couldn't help her, she contacted private detectives. As the months passed and still Nico was nowhere to be found, even the most experienced and expensive detectives were forced to return to Kalli empty-handed. Kalli had nowhere else to turn until she realized something. If detectives couldn't help her, then she'd just have to take matters into her own hands. Some people will say I was crazy, Kalli said. I had already lost everything. I had nothing to lose. Some people would find it crazy that she made 4 trips to Egypt to search for Nico. But if you ask a mother, they probably wouldn't see it as crazy at all. A mother's love stretches far and wide, even all the way to Egypt. To me, it's like a living death, Kalli described of life without Nico. You know, I'm walking, I'm breathing, but it's nothing. The emptiness. After 2 years of hoping, crying, and exhaustive searches, however, Kalli discovered that hope wasn't lost after all. Despite the enormous financial toll, Kalli decided to hire one last private investigator to help her navigate the unfamiliar Egyptian landscape. This, along with her own determination, finally gave Kalli the lead she was searching for. She and the private investigator tracked Nico's whereabouts down to Alexandria, Egypt. Once they knew his general location, Kalli knew how close she was to seeing her son again, so she couldn't help but throw caution to the wind. While disguised as an Egyptian woman, Kalli spent months following her ex-husband and son around Alexandria. She went back and forth between wearing a burqa and a niqab, each time just trying to shield her face from her ex while seeing if Nico was safe. Every time she saw Nico in person, it took everything she had to stick to her plan. "I came so close to my son and I could not touch him," she later said. Kalli knew patience was key. She had to wait for the right moment to act. And on March 14, 2013, Kalli finally made her move. It must have been strange from Nico's perspective. As he walked into school, a woman shrouded in black grabbed his arm and said something he'd waited 2 years to hear. "Nico, it's Mommy. Come with me." But as strange as it might have been, Nico wasn't scared. Not when he looked into the eyes of the woman who called herself his mother. He recognized them as his mother's eyes, which were characteristically blue. With that in mind, he didn't hesitate. Kalli rushed them over to a waiting rickshaw. "Get in," she whispered. And Nico did just that. He was once again being shepherded away from a parent, but this time he was on his way to safety. At least, that's what they hoped. As Kalli held Nico close to her, she finally learned why her ex-husband had kidnapped her son. Nico told her that his father wanted to make him a Muslim because American society was rotting. Atteya, it turns out, was a dedicated member of the Muslim Brotherhood. The duo stayed at a safe house for 3 weeks before flying home, but just because they were out of arm's length from Atteya didn't mean they were safe. Even now, Kalli and Nico keep their address a secret from anyone they don't trust. Still, Kalli has reason for hope. Mohammed Atteya is wanted for kidnapping a U.S. citizen, aka Nico, and he's also wanted for forging documents that lied about Nico's Egyptian citizenship. Now that Nico is home safe, Kalli just wants to regain a sense of normalcy. Nico knew that his mother would come for him, Maria told the press. Nico, of course, was right not to doubt his mother's dedication to finding him. A mother's love truly has no bounds, even when the mother herself is the victim of a terrible crime. Rosalind McGinnis was supposed to live a normal life. She grew up in Springfield, Missouri, where she spent her days with her brothers at the park, playing the violin and excelling in school. Still, there was something about Rosalind that was extra special. She was one of the most ambitious 10-year-olds at her school. She had dreams of becoming a veterinarian and of teaching violin. But these dreams and any hope of a normal life were crushed the day her mother met a man named Henry Piet. At 10 years old, the sexual abuse began. He was never a stepfather, Rosalind said of Henry Piet. He was a child predator. Rosalind would always be haunted by these events, and by the events that would soon take place. Henry exerted his control over the family by moving them to Wagoner, Oklahoma. Far away from the McGinnis family and friends, now they were isolated with Henry, and things were about to take a bizarre turn. See, Henry attempted to marry Rosalind when she was 11. The wedding took place in a van and was officiated by Henry's son. Henry then moved them into a small, shabby tent outside of Gore, Oklahoma. He was desperate to be alone with Rosalind and to cut the family off from society. On January 31st, 1997, Rosalind's hopes for a successful future were officially destroyed when Henry took her from school. "The next thing I know, my mother's not there, my brothers are not there, and I am by myself with this man," Rosalind said. Gail made flyers printed with Rosalind's description and a plea to please help find this child. They stopped searching right before Rosalind's 13th birthday. Her family thought she would be missing forever. And for a while, this didn't change. After kidnapping her, Henry stripped Rosalind of her identity by forcing her to wear glasses and to dye her red hair black. He had them both assume aliases, with Rosalind as Stephanie and himself as Billy Ira Sloop Jr. When she was 13, Rosalind ended up miscarrying her first baby. I don't even know how any human can do that to a child, what he did to me, Rosalind said. Henry then smuggled Rosalind into Mexico, and it was there, when she was just 15, that Rosalind gave birth to her first child. They lived in poverty without the basic necessities new mothers require, like gas, heat, and other utilities. Still, one by one, Rosalind continued to have babies. Henry spent what little money he had on drugs and alcohol, so she had to figure out how to survive on nothing. She begged on the street for money and even sold ice cream just to scrape by. Henry was also getting more violent. Allegedly, the violence escalated from beatings to shootings, and Henry once sliced Rosalind's arm so badly that it cut down to the bone. Life was beyond bleak for Rosalind, until she met Ian and Lisa. The British-American couple often saw Rosalind and her kids at the grocery store, and they soon struck up a friendship. They just wanted anybody to talk to because it was not something that they were allowed to do, Lisa said of Rosalind and her kids. Unfortunately, this brief hope for Rosalind wouldn't last. Always on the move, Henry moved the family to a more remote location in the Oaxaca Mountains, once again cutting Rosalind off from any familiar faces. Here she couldn't even beg for money. They were all just trapped. All seemed lost. Except unbeknownst to Henry, Rosalind maintained communication with Ian and Lisa, though they did not immediately realize that something was amiss. When the couple visited Rosalind at her new home in 2016, they saw the truth of her situation. When Lisa and Ian went inside the ramshackle home, what they saw was horrific. 3 stalls instead of bedrooms, holes in the walls, and very, very thin foam exercise mats for beds, Lisa described. Rosalind and the kids were no longer just living in poverty, they were living in hell. Lisa eventually learned Henry's real age, 62, which was when she did the math. If Rosalind's oldest child was 17, that meant she must have only been 14 or 15 when she gave birth to him. Lisa told Ian, "This is wrong. There's something seriously wrong." Later, while Rosalind was recovering from gallbladder surgery at home, Henry became belligerent and ordered her to do housework. That's when Rosalind had an epiphany. "I knew that if I didn't get out of here, I'd either go insane or I would end up dying and leaving my kids with that man," she said. When Henry was passed out, Rosalind grabbed her kids and escaped to Ian and Lisa's house. Thanks to them, as well as the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Rosalind ended up legally crossing the border into the U.S. Still, Rosalind kept looking over her shoulder in fear of seeing Henry on her heels. Every night, according to Rosalind, she had nightmares of a menacing Henry standing over her bed. She knew the only way she would be free of him was if she shared her story with the world and stood with other victims of abuse. She also hoped her story would bring Henry to justice. On June 13, 2019, Henry was found guilty of kidnapping, engaging in a sexual act with a minor, and a myriad of other charges. During the trial, Rosalind told the world her devastating story and once again proved her resilient nature. While the rest of the world applauds Rosalind's bravery, she can only think of one thing: her freedom. "It's a miracle I'm sitting here today," Rosalind said. She has hope for a better future, propelled by a promising GoFundMe page that has already raised $50,000. Rosalind knew she would never get her childhood back, but she could try to salvage what was left of a childhood for her kids. Rosalind tapped into incredible strength when she picked up her kids and ran out the door. It was a calm, cool collectedness similar to that shown by Cheryl Treadway on a warm spring day in May 2015, when her boyfriend, Ethan Nickerson, pulled a large knife on her. The couple's 3 young children were at school when the 26-year-old grabbed the blade and confiscated his longtime girlfriend's cell phone. He kept Cheryl locked up tight, so she started thinking of ways to escape. Without her cell phone, she couldn't call the police, and screaming for help, she knew, would likely not have the results she wanted. So she appealed to Ethan's sense of fatherhood. She had to pick the kids up from school. Ethan agreed, but he insisted she couldn't go alone, which was why he accompanied her to the elementary school to pick up the kids. They all rode home, probably in silence, the kids in the back seat unaware their father had just pulled a knife on Mom. Back home, Cheryl was in an even worse place than when she started. Not only was she stuck with knife-wielding Ethan, but now her 3 kids were too. She couldn't pick them up and run, but what could she do? Cheryl thought hard, knowing the costs of a misstep. And then an idea hit her. She found Ethan and once again appealed to his fatherhood. "The kids are hungry," she said. "Let's order a pizza. Let's get them some food." Ethan considered for a moment. Maybe he felt a rumble in his own stomach, but he agreed. The kids were hungry. Pizza would do the trick. He relented and let Cheryl use her cell phone, but only to order a pizza through the Pizza Hut app. Cheryl had her phone back, but she couldn't call the police. What if he heard her talking? What if he checked her call history? Would he snap and use the knife he kept on his person? She had to be clever, so she was. See, when you order pizza through Pizza Hut's phone app, there was a comment section to include special instructions. You could ask for extra pepperoni or leave a door code for your apartment. Cheryl used this to her advantage. Along with an order of a large pepperoni pizza, Cheryl included a note to employees in the comment section. It read, "Please help, get 911 to me, 911 hostage help." She placed her order, closed her eyes, and waited. That was all she could do. Meanwhile, employees at the local Pizza Hut gathered around the computer aggregating online and app orders, all fixated on Cheryl's message, "Please help." In 28 years on the job, restaurant manager Candy Hamilton had never seen anything like it. Inside her home, meanwhile, Cheryl waited by the window, watching. She didn't know if her message was well received at the Pizza Hut. The feeling of dread must have been palpable. What if they thought her call was a joke, a prank? But because Cheryl frequently ordered from that Pizza Hut, the employees recognized her name. They knew this was no joke. "We didn't even question it," Candy below said. "We immediately called 911. This call reached the Highlands County Sheriff's Office, which dispatched Lieutenant Curtis Luden and his deputies to the home of Cheryl Treadway and Ethan Nickerson. They parked their cruisers out front. The relief Cheryl felt as the police arrived must have been euphoric, but still she had 3 children to escort from the home before Ethan noticed the police. If he did, would he put that knife to use? Salvation was so close, but only if she played this smart. With her youngest child in her arms, Cheryl wrenched open the front doors, running for the police. Before she could catch her breath, she told Lieutenant Luden below that her other 2 kids were stuck in the house with a knife-wielding Ethan. Though she didn't know it at the time, Cheryl was incredibly lucky. You see, Lieutenant Luden happened to be the lead negotiator on the crisis team. He talked down any number of people in his career. Ethan, he knew, would be another tally mark. The deputies escorted Cheryl to safety, and Lieutenant Luden went to work on Ethan. After 20 minutes, the lieutenant convinced him to drop his knife and surrender. Officers recovered the other 2 children unharmed. Cheryl and her kids were finally safe. Afterward, Lieutenant Luden celebrated Cheryl's smarts. "I don't know if I ever would have thought about it," he said. "I mean, it's just something that she did so naturally. The boyfriend never knew about it until he saw us coming around the corner." Candy, the manager of the Pizza Hut, praised the mother too. "She's the hero in this situation," Candy said. "She just thought outside the box. I think that's amazing." Incredibly, pizza saved another life just a few years later.